Yes, and welcome, Venerable. Thank you again for coming back to this second installment of the Four Noble Truths, the foundation of Buddha's teachings. And I hope you have all your participants prepared your probing questions for Venerable tonight. Otherwise, Venerable will take off from where she left the last time, and no further introduction. Instead, we'll just do a mandala and then lead on to the refuge prayer.
And remember what we're doing with our mandala, not just doing it by rote. What we're doing is we're visualizing the Buddha's present. We want to listen to the Buddha's teachings. I mean, okay, it's through my mouth, but if we've got pure view, we can hear it as Buddha's teachings, get the blessing. And so we need to make a request, you know. You don't go empty-handed when you visit a friend, you make an offering. So here we make an offering of the entire universe, and we request Buddha very happily for the teachings, imagining all the contents of the universe, as Lars sings the prayer in Tibetan.
Sashi perki juk sheng me to tramri raplingi nihirek yan padi sange sheng du me te wagi roku nam da sheng la che pak shu yetsun lama dam pa ke nam ke che ki kala kien se che trin tri Gita sampe du jesi mala sakye churki chapa vaptu so idam kurata mandala kamya tsayami.
Okay, when we do this little prayer, we're reminding ourselves of our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings in these first two lines. And the second two lines, we're stating our motivation, our reason for being together, which causes the action we're doing to have this kind of result. The motivation is the key. So we say one time in English and two times in Tibetan. So we say, I'm taking refuge until I'm enlightened. I'm relying upon the Buddha Dhamma Sangha until I'm enlightened. And so by the virtuous karma we create by listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha to be of benefit to all suffering sentient beings. Sangye Chedang Tsoke Chognam La Jangcho Baru Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chernyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupa Shog Sangye Chedang Tsoke Chognam La Jangcho Baru Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chernyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupa Shog. Part of my Buddha's missing. It's not auspicious. We'll have to look at the picture later and fix it. Okay, people. So I have no idea what we talked about last time. So you better remind me, Lars, and carry on. I don't remember, please. What did we talk about, Lars? Or somebody?
Yes, and Tara.
Yeah, we ended on the third category of the states of mind, mechanical parts of the mind. You're talking about they're neither non-virtuous or virtuous.
Mm. So what was in the framework? I've completely forgotten. You mean we're talking about the Four Noble Truths here?
Yes.
So what was I up to? What was I talking about?
On that was where we ended. And you gave the example.
Well, I must have been on the causes of suffering then, was I? Or what was I talking about?
We also talked about valid cognition. And you also talked about Buddha's model of the mind. And you focused on pleasure and unpleasant and pleasant feelings. Pleasant and unpleasant feelings.
So was that our first talk, our second talk? What did we do before that?
That was our first talk.
And the first one?
Yeah, we're only doing 2 this month.
And also to touch upon attachment vaguely, not too much, also because next month we will have attachment.
What, Lars, say it again, what? What'd you say?
You said you briefly addressed attachment, but next
you did mention about attachment.
What, Lars? Lars, what did you say?
It was that you addressed attachment as once we get what we do want, then it's sort of talking about attachment and.
So you mean I don't remember what I talked about, so we're going to have to start fresh. I'm very sorry. I must have Alzheimer's, so please forgive me. All right. Okay. All right. So it's about the Four Noble Truths. Well, that's Buddha's first teaching, isn't it? That's Buddha's first teaching. He came along, and this is really, if we look at the whole framework of the entire Mahayana path, this is the Hinayana part. This is the first scope and second scope of the Lam Rim. This is the wisdom wing. This is junior school and high school, all these analogies, okay? And Buddha, so in other words, this is all about Buddha describing from his own experience what he has found to be suffering, and that he has found the causes. He has found that you can get rid of the causes and the suffering, and the result of that is what he means by liberation from suffering and its causes, which is your nirvana, this simple, the first nirvana, nirvana, your cessation of suffering and its causes. So he's talking to us. Then when you get onto the Mahayana path, knowing all this, you're now equipped to help others because we're all in the same boat, So in the second noble truth, he narrows that, he says there are causes of suffering, and he narrows it down to two main causes, very clear, very simple, very uncomplicated, but so uncomplicated and so shocking because so different from what we think, we literally can't hear it. I mean, we literally can't hear it. It's very fascinating. Or we just hear it as religion, stick it in the sky, Basically, he says there's two main, okay, so his second one, there are causes. This tells us that he's got this view about causes, and that really what he's saying, one way he's putting is the entire universe is run by the law of cause and effect, Everything is the product of causes. Whatever exists, whatever impermanent phenomenon exists. And this is leading us to emptiness because, this is where he denies the existence of an inherent, intrinsic, permanent self or soul or impermanent, intrinsic, inherent creator. All this is already implied. It's not explicit yet, but it's implied that the entire universe runs in this law of cause and effect, So the law of cause and effect, that, it's what we're known as the law of karma. So there's two causes of suffering. So what is suffering? Suffering, he defines suffering. As we know from the first noble truth, there are three levels. And the first one, you can call it the suffering of suffering. It's like in-your-face suffering. And that's the one we all agree upon, no argument. And basically, that's when the bad things happen. It's very simple as far as we're concerned. That's called suffering. That's the world's view of suffering. Unquestioned, the world's view of suffering. And also, interestingly, it is from a bigger picture point of view in Buddhism, it's the view of the Christian teachings. The Buddha would suggest it's the Christian teachings and the Muslim the teachings that posit the end result of suffering is heaven or paradise. Whereas for Buddha, that's where he diverged from the Hindus. He suggests that that a paradise or heaven, or he would call the God realms, is really still in samsara. And that's what they call happiness. It's the end result. Now you've achieved happiness. You're in God with heaven, and that's eternity. Buddha disagrees. He says it's not the end, and you're still in samsara because you haven't gone far enough in removing suffering and its causes. So he calls that the subtler, more nuanced level of suffering, which is what we would even call happiness. Even if we look from the point of view of all the different realms of existence, within samsara. What defines you as a samsaric being is the presence in your mind of this root delusion called maripa, unawareness, ignorance, ego grasping. That's the root delusion. So the Buddha would suggest, and this is where he diverged from the Hindus, that they haven't uprooted that yet. So he agreed, he went so far as he could, and all the Hindus, and they have found the method to get rid of suffering, the gross suffering and its causes. They found the method to even get rid of the, attachment to some degree, but they still, he says, this is where he diverged, there's an intrinsic belief in an intrinsic I, intrinsic self, intrinsic creator, so on and so forth. And that's where Buddha says, no, that's not viable. So he would call what they call happiness, which is to get, when you finish your human realm, you die and you go to heaven with God. That's still in samsara. That's what he's saying. It doesn't last. It's still samsara. It's very blissful. It's very delicious. Definitely got happy feelings, but you're in samsara still. That's where Buddha diverges. That's his radical point. So he would suggest a subtler level of suffering even after that. The suffering of suffering, that for the Christians is hell, and the Muslims as well. That's hell. And then happiness, then I don't know, the human must be a testing ground. I don't know how they describe human in terms of these different levels of reality, but then heaven is happiness. And that's God realm for the Buddhists, but that's simply the fruit of virtue, and it is very delicious. And it does last a long time, but it's not forever. And you're still in samsara, so it's a subtle level of suffering. Now, we can look at that from the bigger picture point of view of the different realms, but even if we look at it from the point of view of a human realm, we can see we have the grosser experiences of when bad things happen, which is when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And then we can have the experiences when the good things happen, which is what we call when attachment does get what it wants, and we call that happiness. But the Buddha says, sure, yep, better than being punched in the nose, maybe, and initially there's a pleasant feeling arises, but it's not, it's actually a subtler level of suffering. I think that's what we must have talked about last week, to try and identify what we completely assume is happiness and what drives every millisecond of our day-to-day life. All the sentient beings are the same, is a constant attachment. Its main job is to, it's the craving for happy feelings. So of course, within samsara, we think that we get happy feelings from getting objects of the senses and avoiding the ugly objects. So relatively speaking, it is a happy feeling, but why Buddha calls it, and we discussed this, a subtle level of suffering of change, because it doesn't last. So basically in the second noble truth, Buddha points out two main causes of suffering. So uncomplicated. I mean, so uncomplicated, we just don't believe it, because we think it's more complicated than that. 4 million reasons why the world suffers, and 47 books on why Hitler and why this and why that, because we haven't found the answers yet in the philosophical materialist views, and that's a fact. It's not being rude. So the two main causes, one is called karma and one is called delusions. Karma is referring to the shorthand word, referring to actions driven by, so a negative action, very simply the logic for Buddha, happiness, happy feelings, pleasant feelings, and they're in the, like I call them mechanics. That's not a term they use in Buddhism, so don't be misled there. Don't say, oh, Robina says it's mechanics, because no one says it except me, so it's just my term for it, to try and get us around this concept of, because what they call them is neutral. There's negative, positive, and then neither one nor the other, or neutral, and that misleads us. Neutral sounds like they're not important, but they're totally important. That's why it's so important, as we've been discussing, in the Buddhist view of the mind, to understand the meaning of a virtuous state of mind and the meaning of a non-virtuous state of mind. We don't talk that way in modern psychology or neuroscience at all, okay? So anyway, two main causes of suffering in the second noble truth. One is called karma, and the second is called delusion. Now you can flip that over and say there are two main causes of happiness as well. One is called karma, and the other one is called virtue. So delusion is one of the many words used to refer to the neurotic state of mind. I always say Buddha would have liked the term neurotic. It's a very generalized term, like Lama wouldn't. Yeah, she makes up all these different terms to try and get us to understand the character of the negative, the afflictions, the mental afflictions, the negative states of mind, the non-virtues. So from the big picture point of view, the big picture long-term point of view, every millisecond of happiness that you have in a day, which simply means either a moment of happiness in your mind, a pleasant feeling, or when things go nicely, when your boyfriend smiles at you, when the cake tastes delicious, when the sun is shining. So when the external conditions are pleasing for us and so trigger a pleasant feeling. These are all these moments of pleasure, millisecond by millisecond, are literally the fruit of a past virtuous action. Literally, that's it. It's technical. In other words, every time an apple drops on the ground, I know that's why I get confused about botany. Does one apple come from one seed, or I don't understand? Does anyone know about botany? Does one apple come from one seed? Someone has to tell me this, otherwise I'll say the wrong thing. Does anybody know botany? Does one apple come from one seed?
One apple comes from one seed.
It does?
Yes.
Okay, good. So all day, think of it like this, in your life, either apples are dropping, and the assumption is that apples are nice, or an ugly old, disgusting, smelly, putrid old weed is dropping on your head. So every second an ugly old weed falls down, that's the fruit of a negative action, one seed you popped in your mind from the past. This is the grosser level of suffering. When you did an action of your body and speech, 1, karma, 2, based on a delusion in your mind. So that will ripen in this simple sense of an experience of something bad happening, the ripening of a negative seed. So this ugly weed pops down, you know, and every time a nice apple drops down, that's the ripening. That's the ripening of one of your virtuous actions. That is to say, an action done by your body and speech, driven by a virtuous state of mind. So every millisecond of a moment of pleasure, and there are 84,000, no, that's 84,000, I think 84, what is it, 96 in a finger snap, you know, I think there's much smaller now with these stop clocks. You get a millionth of a second, you know. So every millisecond, every moment you can count, each one is either a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neutral feeling. We forget the neutral here. So pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling. So we want the pleasant feelings. We are junkies for the pleasant feelings, and we can't stand the unpleasant feelings, you know. So the literal cause, the actual cause, the main cause is in the past, you know. How come an apple drops down is because you've planted the seed, who knows when. So every moment of happiness that you have is the fruit of a past virtue. And this is where we are literally up a garden path, completely lost about what the cause of happiness is, because we don't have that view. So because we've got attachment in the mind, which is the one that's doing the hungering for a happy feeling, and because we've got the senses, and then we've got the sense objects, which is the outside world, and we're addicted to believing that getting the cake, the object of that sense, or getting the pleasant view or the pleasant sound, that it does indeed trigger a moment of happiness. But we think the cake is the cause of that happy feeling, whereas in fact you had a little stock of virtuous seeds in your bank vault, and then the cake, eating the cake, meeting the cake, triggered it ripening. But the tragedy is you've just wasted one of your virtuous karmic seeds from the past, because it's now triggered as a happy feeling. And then you get attached to the happy feeling, and you get attached to the wrong view that the cake is the cause of it. So you hunger for another piece of cake. So you're using up. So you got money in the bank, you stick the ATM card in, and out comes $1, and then you use it to wipe your bottom in the toilet. That's a waste, isn't it? Well, that's what we're doing. Every time a happy feeling comes from eating the cake or jumping on the new boy or looking at the rainbow or hearing the pleasant sound, we grasp at that object, and we grasp at the view that that's the main cause of that pleasant feeling. So we keep doing the same action. So that's bad enough. But then that's when it gets really tragic. You look at the example of the fisherman. He gets really happy feelings when he meets fishing because of the past karma to kill. So he thinks, of course, that killing fish is the cause of those happy feelings. So he keeps killing fish. This is the literal tragedy of samsara, where PISSING, our virtuous karmic seeds, down the toilet. We put in the ATM card. We've got money in the bank. It's past virtue. You put the ATM card in, and out comes $1, and you use it to wipe your bum in the toilet. What a terrible waste. That's samsara. Nothing wrong with happy feeling. As Lama Yeshe would say, the more pleasure, the better, dear. Because when we hear this analysis, then we get guilty and think, oh, I'm not supposed to have happy feelings. No, you're missing the point. As Lama says, the more pleasure, the better, dear. He means it. But we misunderstand because we conflate happiness with attachment. We discussed this last week, I'm sure. So the two main causes of happiness: a positive action in the past, driven by a virtue, then drops a seed into your bank vault. And that's going to ripen either in the fully ripened result as a happy rebirth. Second, a tendency to keep doing the same good action. Third, a result of that action happening to you. And fourth, an environmental result. And then equally, suffering is the fruit of a negative action. One, that brings the result of a lower realm rebirth. Two, the tendency to keep doing the negative action. Three, it's happening to you. And fourth, the environmental result. So really, it's not complicated. The theory isn't that we have to then know what a negative action is and stop doing it because we don't want the fruit dropping on our head every day. And we want to know what a virtuous action is, and we want to keep doing them. The very basic level of practice, though, is not even doing a virtuous action yet. It's refraining from doing negative ones. That's a full-time practice. Merely living in vows and consciously not killing, stealing, lying, etc., is tremendous virtue. You're not even positively, actively doing a virtuous action. You're merely refraining from harming, which is the whole energy behind this first level of practice, the pratimoksha path, the path of individual liberation. It's already tremendous practice. It will ripen. So by living in vows of not killing, not stealing, not jumping on the wrong partner, not lying, etc., it ripens very deliciously as incredible happiness, a happy rebirth, positive tendencies, very happy experiences, and very pleasant environment. It's not complicated. It's quite simple theory. It's just so different from what we think. We can't hear it, you know. This is the thing. Because we're addicted to the wrong method. And attachment's the problem there because it's a junkie, you see. So 2 causes of suffering. One is karma and the other is delusion. Karma means the action you did in the past. It was driven by a delusion. And this ripens in the future as unpleasant feelings. So that's the trouble. When you know, if you eat the wrong cake, you know, you eat the carrot cake thinking it was chocolate cake and you vomit, then you think the carrot cake caused the suffering of the vomiting. No, it was just a trigger. The vomiting, the unpleasant feeling, the experience of unpleasantness is from a past negative action. But the disgusting cake was what triggered it. So this is why the very first level of practice is not even about the very first level, junior school. This is the Four Noble Truths is junior school and high school. It's the pratimoksha, it's the first and second scopes of the Lam Rim. It's the wisdom wing. It's the Hinayana teachings, the teachings we share with the people on the Hinayana path, same teachings. So that's divided into the 2. And the very first level is dealing with the karma one. The second one deals with the delusion one. The first lot is where you abide by the laws of karma. And karma is mainly taught in terms of behavior. Vows are about behavior. They're all about controlling the servants of the delusions. You've got to first control the servants of your delusions. Delusions are the point. Delusions are the problem. Attachment's the problem. But because it's so primordial, and we're so addicted to following it with our body and speech, the first thing to control is your body and speech. We know that perfectly well. If you're an alcoholic, problem is that attachment. The problem is attachment to alcohol. The problem is attachment to alcohol. But we know that nobody would expect you to give up attachment to alcohol while you continue to drink alcohol. You've got to first give up the object. It's obvious, it's clear. That's why if you live with a person who continually makes you completely crazy angry, you don't blame them, but you know their trigger, they're like a red rag to the bull, you just kindly leave them before they kill you. I was not a joke when I say that 40% of all women on the planet who get murdered are murdered by the bloke in the same bed. It's not about men, it's about attachment and idiocy, how we don't follow, we have no sense of self-worth. So we keep running like, you know, moths to a flame and then wonder why we get killed. Because we have no control over our body and speech. That's the point. So the first practice is control your body and speech, which is already a tremendous practice. Huge. It'll solve 90% of your problems in daily life if you just shut your mouth, you know. I mean, like I say, we mightn't go around raping and killing too many people, but we've got uncontrolled mouths. We vomit out of our mouths, you know. So controlling our speech is one of the most basic levels of practice in relation to karma. In relation to the delusions, that gets more subtle. That's the middle scope. That's more nuanced. You've got to control your body and speech first. You know. That's living in the vows, doing your practice every day, doing your purification. It's a tremendous practice. You should be so happy to have it. You know. So the first kind of suffering is, you know, this is dealing with the first kind of suffering. And when you get to so that's also another way of putting it. By learning to control your body and speech in the first scope, in the first wing of the first, in junior school, as I call it, that's dealing with karma. That's dealing with the first kind of suffering, the suffering of suffering, when the bad things happen to you. lower realm rebirth, or bad experiences, being harmed and lied to and stolen from and killed and tortured and all that stuff. So the first scope is the method for how to stop that kind of future suffering. Then you get to the second scope, high school, and now you get to the root of the problem, which is the delusions. And effectively, in the Four Noble Truths, Lord Buddha is telling us that attachment is the main source of suffering. It's not the root delusion. Ignorance is the root delusion. But attachment is the main cause of suffering, because this is the point, quite literally, this world we live in, Buddha calls it a desire realm, not just this human one, but the hell beings, the spirits, the animals, the humans, the gods, and the anti-gods, these 6 suburbs in samsara, in the desire realm, the realm of attachment, where one experiences along the spectrum of intense bliss in the God realms to the most intense suffering in the hell realms. And this is why suffering is not getting what the nice experiences, and happiness is getting the nice experiences, but they're all suffering. So this realm that we live in, think about it. Look at this body of ours, these 5 holes that need feeding, isn't it? Eyes, ears, touch, tongue, nose. So the universe, the world out there, is quite literally the objects of those 5 senses. And we, karmically, over eons of practicing attachment, have literally created this body and this world. It's the karmic result, collectively, of all of our addiction to following attachment over countless eons. This way, again, it sounds like science fiction to us, but if we take the view that Buddha was telling us that mind is beginningless necessarily, it can't have a first moment, it's a bizarre idea. So the only conclusion is that there's no first cause. You can't have such a thing. So therefore, mind and matter are beginningless. It is the only logical deduction you can come to. If that's true, then it's clear this human realm, even the way we say it in the world about the earth and the planet and the big bangs and all that, it's just, it's not the first. Of course, it's not the first. There's been a human, see, the human, animal, spirit, hell being, God, they're just terms for certain levels of mind that happen to come along with a certain level of physicality, that's all. But they're states of mind. So they have existed since beginningless time, because delusions have existed since beginningless time. So the delusions manifest in certain bodies and certain experiences. You know, so then if a human experience has existed before this planet, which is the logical deduction, what was it like? Well, that's the thing that they would say in the teachings, that we're in a very degenerate time right now. That means that everything's very gross. Very gross. So we have these, so eons ago, and they always just talk about eons, but you have to be able to be, I don't know how many millions of years that would be, or billions. If you keep tracking back your mind, and your mind was existing before this planet, before the Big Bang. So where was your mind? Well, it was obviously still in samsara, because you're still in samsara now. You can't get out of samsara, then fall back in again. If you realize emptiness and cut the root of samsara, then you cannot fall back into samsara. By definition, you can't. It's not possible. So if we're in samsara today, it's because we've been in samsara since beginningless time. So it's, if then our mind had had a human birth before, and it has, what kind of experience was it? Not on this planet. Not discussing that type of history. We're discussing the Buddhist approach. Then they say it was like a very subtle state. Like a bit, I would say the way they describe a God realm, it's a bit like how it would have been to be a human. But it was a very God realm. You're so attached, you're so addicted to happiness, you're so addicted to pleasure. But you're useless. You can't hear any dharma. You're just blissed out, completely blissed out, and it's useless. You just ruin your life. It's just useless. Whereas the human birth before this planet existed, it was a much subtler state. We had the mind as a result of incredible virtue. We had only access to virtues. We hadn't realized emptiness yet, and we had a subtle physical energy. Our body was made of light, just like the God realms. And that was a human birth. It lasted for a long time. You learn Dharma very easily. You can get enlightened very easily because you're more conducive. The condition was a far more conducive one. But then gradually, as time goes by, the delusions began to slowly manifest in the mind. Dissatisfaction began to grow, attachment began to grow, the anger began to grow, depression, anxiety, all the worries began to come more and more. And so they would pollute the wind energies, which eventually caused us to have human body on a planet looking like a bunch of apes. So attachment is the main cause of this planet and of the suffering and the happiness that we have. You know, this is the point. Attachment is massive, way more pervasive, way more profound, way more subtle, way more primordial than we can possibly imagine. You know, so don't hold your breath in trying to get rid of it. It takes time. So the Four Noble Truths, effectively, attachment is the main source of the problem, right? So attachment is dealt with in the second scope, like I'm saying. In the first scope, it's all about karma. Control your body, control your speech. In the 10 non-virtues, Buddha's first little teaching, I'm going back to junior school now. In the first little teaching Buddha gives, the first kind of presentation he gives is his little list of 10 don'ts, you know? And the first 3 are don't kill, don't take the ungiven, and don't jump on the wrong partner. So don't, in other words, control your body and refrain from the grossest actions based on the delusions that harm others. He doesn't say don't eat too much cake. It's the same principle. He doesn't tell us that. He says at least don't do actions with your body and your body first that harm others, because they're the heaviest ones. They're the actions that bring the heaviest result to oneself. The second lot, there are 4 of them, are speech. Don't say words that aren't true. Don't use harsh language, abuse people. Don't say bad things behind people's backs that create disharmony. And don't just rabbit on about nothing. 4 things of the speech. Then the last 3 are the mind. He begins to kind of get us to, at least, is the way I put it, at least begin to control the heaviest level of the 3 poisons. So the 3 poisons, of course, are ignorance, attachment, and aversion. And they are the source of all the 84,000 neurotic states of mind that Buddha talks about. As Ling Rinpoche says, 21,000 are rooted in ignorance, 21,000 are rooted in attachment, 21,000 are rooted in aversion. And the fourth 21,000 are rooted in all 3. It's a really coherent kind of map. Then I asked the Geshis, where am I going to find which text to find all these? He said, you won't find them. So I don't know. Buddha always talks about 84,000, but I keep waiting to uncover the list somewhere. But it sounds very coherent. So it all comes down to these 3 poisons. So these 3, the last 3 of the 10 that Buddha exhorts us at the very beginning of practice to refrain from, not as a vow, just a suggestion, are to do with the mind. But they're the kind of, the way for me to say it is, they're the grosser level, the heavier level of these 3 poisons. So at least he exhorts us to at least refrain from the heaviest craving, you know, which is the consequence of following attachment and causes terrible future suffering. So this constant, the deepest level of never being satisfied. And you would argue that the way that manifests in the world is when it's related to sense objects. Like you hoard 40,000 objects and you jump on people all day and night, and you're frantically attached to physical things. It's the grossest level. And then always craving more. I mean, the worst level of attachment, of dissatisfaction, you know, you can see it in the world. At least attempt to refrain from that. The next one is at least attempt to refrain from the heaviest level of anger. Bad enough having anger with somebody, but when you get over it, you're okay. But some people can't give it up and are bitter and resentful and want the other person to suffer. And that's what causes them to make them suffer. Malice, ill will is this heavy duty level of anger. So painful for the mind, for the person having it. And the third one, you see, ignorance is a general term that can be referred to the main delusion, the root delusion, but also there's different kinds of ignorance. Of course, obviously, there's ignorance of cause and effect, ignorance of karma, which is huge, ignorance of how things, ignorance of permanence, ignorance of all sorts of things, all kinds of ignorance. So here, the grossest level that they're referring to is that kind of very heavy, narrow, fundamentalist kind of mind, very fundamentalist type of ignorance that plays out in daily life. You see it with people. And we've all got it. It's a stubbornness, holding on. I'm right, you're wrong. Things are black and white, no nuance, no shade. We can see that. That means it's the exact opposite to dependent arising, vivid and rigid and stuck and fixed. And you can't see any shade, any color, any gray. It's black or white. That's the type of mind, but really heavy. And it really means a very ignorant type of person, very narrow-minded, very bit thick, bit ignorant. It's not being rude. That's at least refrain from that heavy type of ignorance, you know. These are the 10 lists, the list of Buddhas. But then he gets into the teachings about karma. It's all about behavior initially, you know. Because in the first scope of practice, Buddha wants us to at least control the body and speech, which at least stops us from having the heaviest of the four kind of karmic results. Lower realm suffering, you know, heavy negative tendencies, heavy negative experiences, heavy negative environment. At least refraining from that. Then you get to the middle scope, high school, now having subdued your body and speech to some degree, living in vows and doing purification every day, now you got the luxury to be able to begin to see your mind, which runs the show anyway. That's the logic of the stages of practice. It's very logical. Another way to put it from the bigger picture point of view, by living in vows and refraining from harming others, you at least don't get born in the lower realms. And then by learning, and then by giving up attachment at the next level, you stop even being reborn as a human or a god. But you're still in samsara, and that's where Buddha diverged from the Hindus. They talk about this third level of suffering, which is called all-pervasive suffering. And that's a state. So when you've given up the first kind of suffering from the Hindu perspective, you've given up the first kind of suffering, you don't have the lower realms. You're giving up the second kind of suffering, which is giving up attachment. You don't even be born in the gods or the humans, but you're now born in this subtle state. They call it the formless realm, different stages of subtlety. And the subtlest level of that, I don't know all the names for it. That is said to be liberation. For the Buddha, no. You haven't realized emptiness yet. You haven't gone far enough. That's the Buddha's approach. So by stopping the first kind of suffering, by abiding by the laws of karma and stopping harming, killing, stealing, lying, you stop lower realm suffering and bad things happening to you, even in this life. Second, by giving up attachment, you stop being born in the humans and the gods. Third, by realizing emptiness, you quit all of the suffering. You're out of samsara, totally. That's the unique approach of the Buddhas. Because even this formless state, the subtlest, I don't know all the words for it, it could last for eons, subtle absorption. It's still, ignorance is still there. This is what Buddha would say. Ego grasping is still there. So the karma is used up and you fall back down to the lower realms. That's the Buddha's approach. So this needs a lot of looking at, a lot of study, you know, it's quite kind of interesting. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. Any questions? 2:40, what are we? Any questions, please, come on.
Please raise your hand. Ask those wonderful questions of yours. Or allow me to get started.
Okay, good, Lars, go on.
Referring to the 6 realms of existence in this desire realm, I can clearly see human realms, animal realms being pervaded.
Stop. What did you say?
Those realms, I can clearly see.
No, you said some words. You said some words in there. I need to repeat what you said. I think something was wrong. What were the words you used?
In reference to these 6 realms in the desire realm. Was that
it? Go on. And then you said a word after that, something like pure. You used the word pure.
I did?
Yeah, I thought I heard you say pure. So start again your question, please.
All right. No, I can clearly see why the human realms and the animal realms, God realms, are pervaded by attachment. However, with the hell realm, why would that be attachment? I would rather see it as an aversion, like it's.
I know, but darling, it's no, okay, but what's the difference with the animals? The same. Why would you say animals is to do with No, you know, no. What you're suggesting is because there doesn't seem to be even a moment of pleasure. That's what you're saying, isn't it? So it's all, no, listen. Okay, another way to put it. Attachment is the default thing that drives everybody, Lars. And when you do negative actions, harming others, you understand? That will then eventually, if it's a complete action, will ripen in an experience of such suffering called the hell realms that there's not even a moment of pleasure, but it's the result of it. That's what exactly it's aversion, because attachment totally never for 1 second is getting what it wants. It's in reference to attachment. Everything is in reference to attachment. So gods and humans or gods, let's say, which is really delicious, that's attachment getting what it wants all the time, which is blissful feelings. Humans are less blissful feelings. Animals, you could even argue, have a little bit of blissful feeling. You could say spirits have a tiny bit, and the hells almost have zero. But it's all in reference to attachment getting what it wants or not getting what it wants. Attachment's the default view that underpins all of it. Can you understand that?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
But the way Lama Zopa describes what we think of happiness when we get what attachment wants, he says, actually, it seems like happiness, but actually it's more than even, it's actually, we have to really begin to see how it's actually an experience of suffering. And that's what really is hard for us to see, because we're totally addicted to those experiences. So it's quite subtle, you know. But yes, anyway, that's a good point. Thank you. But it's in reference to attachment. It's along the spectrum of getting what attachment wants to never getting what it wants. That's the point. If there were no attachment, you wouldn't have these 6 experiences. That's the point. Do you understand?
Yes, thank you.
Good, thank you. That's why the formless realm and the form realm are outside the desire realm. They're different. Because even the formless beings don't have only have mind. They don't even have the grosser. Aggregates. There's just mind, but still it's samsara, because there's no emptiness, what Buddha would say. So go on. Yeah, questions, please. Questions.
Yeah, I have another one, but it's
go on.
It's a bit outside of this topic today. It's about the liberation vows. I'm
Who?
reading
About what?
about it's about liberation vows, the private moksha vows.
Well, it's totally to do with the topic. What are you talking about?
Good, excellent. I'm reading this book, The Bodhisattva Vows, by Dakpo Rinpoche Gyampa Yamshok, and it reads in the introduction that you can only take the liberation vows once, and then if you break them, you're done for this life.
I have no idea. I mean, I've not heard that. I have no idea. I have not heard that. I can only tell you what I've heard.
All right, because
I've heard pass on Lama Zopa's teachings, and Lama, he's my source, you know. And in the typical text in Refuge, that you break your vows, and you can, you know, you can purify them. So I mean, you're really sure what you're saying? Would you please give me the quote? I need you to get the actual quote.
I have to look it up and send it by mail. It's a huge
Thank
book.
you. But I mean, what do you think he's saying?
I think that it's only like maybe it's the heavy karma that would propel you to a negative. It's the heavy karma that would propel you to a negative karma.
I don't know what you're saying, Lars. You better get the quote and ask me exactly.
Yeah, I'll find the quote and send it to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Yeah. So anybody else got a question?
Yes.
Go on, Lars. Any more? Lars, more? That was it?
Please ask your questions.
Yes, Alona.
Hi, Venerable. Thank you for your teaching.
All right, sweetheart.
Nice to see you.
Yes.
I bought this book, The Four Noble Truths by Geshe. It is you recommend it.
By who?
Geshe.
Geshe Tashi. Geshe.
Geshe.
Why? Geshe. Yeah. Geshe Tashi. And it's called what?
Four Noble Truths.
Okay, the one by Geshe Tashi in London, the one published by Wisdom.
Yeah, it
Okay,
is. You recommended it. So
okay, good. The question.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good, fantastic.
But the question is about the karma, not about. I've read and heard in the teachings that an awakening mind doesn't create karma anymore.
I don't know, you have to be more precise. What are you saying?
In awakening mind.
I don't know what you mean by awakening mind. What do you mean by that?
Enlightened. An enlightened mind doesn't create karma.
You mean a Buddha? You mean a Buddha?
Yeah.
What are the words he says? I mean, there's a way of saying okay, there's a way of understanding what he means by that, because the fact is, even when it's an enlightened mind, still millisecond by millisecond, there is only virtue in the mind, and that grows more virtue. So you can, a simple sense of cause and effect, you can argue it is the law of cause and effect. And the way of describing karma is the law of cause and effect. But polluted, contaminated karma is only for sentient beings, of course, yes.
Okay.
What, you don't sound very convinced. What's your question?
I just,
What did you think it meant?
I thought like the karma always, it's kind of what I understand. The karma is created by the ignorance.
That's right. Of course, when ignorance is there, you can't have, it's contaminated. If you understand my way, I think an easygoing way of putting it is, when you're an enlightened mind, there's no ignorance, there's no delusions, but your mind still exists, doesn't it?
Yes.
Every millisecond of your virtue keeps producing more virtue. You can't say it doesn't do that. That's the simple product of the simple process of cause and effect. That's in play all the time. Karma is usually referring to polluted karma, contaminated karma, karma driven by ignorance and delusions. That's what usually the way we use the word.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought the karma is only this negative energy, and then it doesn't
don't say
work
that.
in the same way.
No, it's not true. What you just said is not true. Negative energy. Karma can also be virtuous.
Yeah. Yeah, just what my confusion was, it's like, because I thought it's created by root ignorance, maripa. So therefore, if it's positive or negative, it still have negative connotation to it. But I guess I'm wrong.
Okay. First of all, the grossest level is when out of it and deluded a negative state of mind, you will harm others. That's creating negative karma, and ignorance is the root. Yes. Then you stop harming others, but you still haven't realized emptiness. So there's still ignorance in your mind, but now you do virtuous actions. Of course, you're not out of samsara yet. So, but ignorance is still there. And eventually you realize emptiness, and then eventually you add bodhicitta, and now you're a Buddha. So then, of course, there's no any kind of virtuous in the conventional meaning of negative and of positive karma. There can be no such thing. But what I'm trying to get at, Alona, is word karma is referring to a law of cause and effect, right? And everything that exists, including an enlightened mind, exists within the natural framework of cause and effect. So you could argue a Buddhist person, a Buddha, only being virtuous and only having wisdom, that moment by moment produces the next moment of wisdom and the next moment of it's still the law of cause and effect applying. Are you understanding my point?
Yeah, I hear you. I understand.
Good.
Yeah.
Good,
Yeah.
darling. Good. Thank you. It's a good point. Thank you so much.
you.
Good, sweetheart. What else, people? Yes, Miriam. Talk to me, sweetheart.
Hi, Venerable.
Hi, darling.
Question. Hi, nice to see you. Question about environmental karma. Like right now, I find myself in a place, I'm in Zurich, which is where I wanted to be. And I'm in a construction site, and at the minute 7 a.m. it starts, and I'm completely exposed to noise. So it's like I have this environmental karma, right? Exactly. And it's like a very heavy practice for me, because I open my eyes and first thing is aversion instead of gratitude for precious human. So I understand it's practice. So I'm cleaning this karma. But what kind of karma is it that I'm actually finishing here, or experiencing?
So I understand.
I don't get that. Yeah.
Well, so I mean, you could, if you're hearing ugly sounds all the time, yeah. You could argue that that's from abuse. Maybe you could argue that that's from abusive speech, perhaps, from past karma of abusive speech, perhaps.
Aha.
I think so. I mean, if you're hearing ugly sounds, well, I mean, people aren't abusing you. No one's coming shouting at you. It's not personal, but it's this constant ugly sound. Or if you have ugly, I mean, all the thing, everything we experience that we have aversion to, that is definitely the fruit. For sure, it's the fruit. But I would say it was ugly sound. I mean, just thinking about it, possibly from abusive speech. I mean, possibly. But the real practice, darling, is knowing it's from the past negative action. Maybe you're not quite sure which one. But the ideal practice is the one of the bodhisattva path, and emptiness. the real one is, yes, be happy that you're purifying by having the rubbish, because by having it and not having aversion to it, you're finishing the karma. By having it and having aversion to it, you just create more negative karma. By having it and glad that you're finishing all these shitty weeds falling on your head, you know, instead of apples, you're finishing those karmic seeds. Then the next powerful practice is to see it as having no inherent nature, emptiness. And the next one is to be actually over the moon delighted that you've got it, because that's really the most powerful, the bodhicitta one, because if you're on the body, on the path, what you're trying to do is give up attachment and delusions, isn't it? That's your job, isn't it?
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so every second you don't get what attachment wants. What a marvelous opportunity to purify attachment. That's really the best way to practice it. But the other one is, it's interesting. I mean, I happen to use the example for myself. I have ringing in my ears. It's not as loud as a building site, I must say that, but it's definitely it's there all the time, you know, all the time, and it's a very common experience. And some people's must be worse, I know, but I know that I have been forced to practice with it. Otherwise I'd go crazy, you know, because if you resist it, you just get madder and go crazy. So what I've tried to practice to do two things. One, not pay attention to it. Not pay attention to it. Consciously not pay attention. In other words, to pay attention to other things, that my job, my thinking, I'm doing what I'm doing, my work, not pay attention to it. And the second, when I suddenly notice it, because it's always there in the background, when I pay attention to it, then I try to label it as a nice sound. And I welcome it. It really works, I promise, because I had no choice. I'm not trying to be noble like a saint, because I don't have a choice, because it can't go away, you know. Do you understand? And it works. It definitely works. So greet the noise if you do notice it, but have it just in the background, and then learn to pay attention. That's what concentration meditation is learning constantly to pay attention to something else. It's practice, honey, surely practice. There's a beautiful book, maybe you should read it, by Venerable Rene Fusy. I don't know how you say his name, our marvelous monk. I always mention the Swiss monk from Zurich. He's a meditator, and he has a book recently he put out exactly about this. He went off to do a retreat, and then there was a building site next door or something. So he had to use it as his practice. And I think I've heard it's a very wonderful little book. So find that. His name is Rene, Feusi. You know him?
Yes.
Look for
it. I heard of him, yes.
Exactly the practice. It's exactly the practice, honey child. Okay? Good, darling. Thank you so much.
I thank you.
Okay, good.
I took the liberty of posting a link to Rene Feusi's book in the chat.
Wonderful. Very good.
Thank you. Thank you, Lars. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? No questions. Okay. So why don't we, as an exercise then, just go through this list of the 10 non-virtues and each of the 4 karmic results. This is the relation to sounds and things. I mean, it's very general, okay? It's very, very general. Let me find it. And I'll just list them. It's very helpful. Because this is really the most powerful way to apply karma. I'll go into it when I find the text. I'll find the text and I'll go into it. Maybe it's in here. I can't remember. This could be in here. Let's have a look. Don't think it's in here. No. Not in this book. Maybe it's in this one. No, not in this one. Oh, yes, here it is. Here we go. Okay, just read it just roughly. So analyze. So this is really a really powerful way to summarize our entire life in terms of the 4 ways that karma ripens. It includes all our experiences, and it's not complicated. We mix them all up together, you know. So let me explain. Let me find it. This is karma. The mind is middle stroke. We're back to the first stroke. Back to the first stroke. There's page 38, 39. Here we go. Okay. All right. So there's 10 non-virtuous actions. Buddha's very first kind of little list, like I said, suggestions. They're not vows. You don't vow, but they're the start. They're the basis, a summary of if you're trying to live according to Lord Buddha's view of the world at the very first level, and you're going to, you know, you're trying to use this list of 10 as guidance for your mind, you know. So the basic reason behind abiding by the laws of karma, this is the crucial point that I think we miss totally in the West, because we're so used to the dualistic view of punishment and reward. And when we hear someone says, don't do this and don't do that, we have this deep assumption that if I do it, I'm a naughty girl and I'll get punished. So we hear it as punitive. You know, it was totally mistaken, totally wrong view. What Buddha's doing is basically like a miracle, so kind. As a kind advisor, he is giving us a list of 10 things that he is suggesting that if we refrain from them, this will produce future happiness. Ordinary happiness, forget big happiness. And do we not at the very least want at least happy feelings, happy experiences, no one harming us, happy bodies, happy food, happy things, at least minimum. It's not complicated. We don't hear it like that. And if we do, our lives are transformed. I tell you, we grow up, we become accountable. So, okay. The result of these 10 non-virtues, these 10 little list of 10 things, the results. So there are 4 ways that karma ripens. The first kind is called the fully ripened result, which is a type of rebirth, okay? A type of rebirth. Human, animal, spirit, hell, God, in these 6 realms, okay? There's a couple of gods. So the fully ripened result of a virtuous action, such as non-killing, where there'd be an object, you have an intention not to kill, and you're motivated by a compassionate motivation, and you do the action, and the result of a living being, they don't die. That drops a main seed in your main karmic bank vault that will ripen as a human birth, a God birth, or something like that. That's a fully ripened result. So that's the same. So then, in terms of negative actions, there can be a fully ripened result for any one of these 10 actions, and it's the same every time. It'll be some kind of lower realm, one or the other. It doesn't go into detail. So that's the first kind of karma. The second kind of karma is experience similar to the cause. So this is the one of you see, this is the one, I think of the one that you mentioned, Miriam, yours is environmental. So experience similar to the cause is the same for each action, meaning if you look at killing, okay, the fully ripened result of killing, I'll go through the 4. There are 4 results. The first kind of result, let's go through the list of 10. So killing. So killing, the fully ripened result will be rebirth in one of the 3 lower realms, right? And for that action to be a fully ripened result has to be the object is there, the mouse. 2, you intend to kill and the motive is negative. 3, you do the action, and 4, the mouse dies, roughly speaking. If that karma seeds into your bank vault and it ripens at the time of your death, your mind will be thrown into one of those lower realms, depending on the intensity of the motivation, the intensity of the action, and so on and so forth, you know. The experience similar to the cause is it'll happen to you. So the experience similar to the cause of, let's say, killing would be you get killed or you die young. Pretty simple. But also, as Amazoba says, you you'll always have, or you'll always, you have many troubles and difficulties and no success in your activities. This could be the result of past killing, an experience similar to the cause. So experience is similar to the cause. Think about it. One, we've got the fully ripened result of non-killing, haven't we? We've got a human body. There's that. Two, in this human body, we have a mind. And that's the type of karma called action or intentions similar to the cause. So that's your mind. So clearly with killing, that would ripen as a tendency to kill, pretty much, a tendency to kill. The thought arises all the time, An experience of everything is in the outside world is basically broadly, it's like how you're seen and treated is the way I like to put it. So you have your own mind, and then you have how you're seen and treated by others. That one's the experiences, pretty much, is the outside, how the outside world impacts upon you, apart from the environment. It's usually sentient beings, So the fully ripened result of killing is you have a lower realm rebirth. And depending on the intensity of the action, the amount of killing, the heaviness of the motivation, and the object, that depends on which suffering realm it'll be, A tendency to kill is the result, is what you'd wake up in this life, if you haven't purified that, you'd have a tendency to kill. And look at the human realm. Most humans kill something, which means most humans have a tendency in their mind to kill, which is pretty tragic. And why? Because they haven't purified it. Why? Because they haven't lived in vows. That's why I tell the difference. Say the difference between that little boy who, his mother was taking the lice out of his head and he's crying with compassion, automatically having compassion for the lice. And the other little boy, when he met fishing, he fell in love with fishing and spent his life killing. We can deduce the little boy who had compassion. He'd lived in a vow of non-killing. So he woke up in this life with no thought to kill. It's like a miracle. That's why vows are so tremendous. The easiest way to practice is live in vows. They're so tremendous. It purifies your mind so radically. And the key one is if you wake up in this life with no thought to kill. It's incredible. Can you imagine? So the action similar to the cause, or the intention, meaning the habit, is the result. So killing, obviously you wake up in this life with a tendency to kill. An experience similar to the cause of killing is you get killed or die young. And look at the world. Look at the world. Babies die. Fetuses die. We never think of fetuses. I don't think we ever do research on how many fetuses die. But think about it. Abortion or miscarriage. You're labeled human from the time you're conceived in your mother's womb, So then if you die young, even before you get born, imagine the numbers of people who get killed, who die even before they're born. That's the result of killing. That's experience similar to the cause of having past killed. And the environmental result is the physical world itself harms you. Now that's COVID. So COVID, you don't get it from eating a carrot, but you get it from kissing your mother. You get it from other humans. So from that perspective, that's environmental karma. Your mother's part of the environment in that framework. So even just the physical world, including the people and the animals, contact with them causes you to get sick or to die. So the fully ripened result of killing is you get a lower realm. We are experiencing the fully ripened result of non-killing, but we can experience the other three results in this life. The experience similar to the cause is you die young or get sick, or die young or get killed. The environmental result is you get sick, you got weakness, you always get sick, the physical world harms you, the water harms you, the pollution, whatever. And the action similar to the cause, or the intention similar to the cause, which is the worst one, is the tendency to keep killing. This is the tragic one, because you go straight back to the lower realms after you finish this life. Killing. Stealing. It's obvious, Each case, fully ripened result is the same as one type of the lower realms. It doesn't give you details. The experience similar to the cause, always lacking in wealth, possessions and resources. You never make enough money. You can never make ends meet. Even rich people have this problem. They can't get, look at this, rich people going broke, or rich people not being able to access their cash. They can't make ends meet. That's the result of stealing. By stealing, you block receiving. It's very logical, isn't it? Or just being poor. You can never make ends meet. You get things stolen from you. People won't pay their debts. You can't get credit at the bank. always your, or you have a lot of, you have common property. Like people in prison have this one. They own nothing, You can look at the world, terrible suffering in the world. I think the majority of the world are poor. This is other things. One is stealing, but the other one is being miserly, consciously not giving. This is absolutely a cause. That's not the same as stealing. That's a meanness and not wanting to give. That means you never receive. It's pretty clear. You're always born poor and you can't. So that's a very different action, isn't it? One is stealing and one is not giving. They're different actions. And the environmental result. So you'll have the mind. Obviously, you have a tendency to steal. It'll always just pop up for you, And the environmental result, you'll be born in a very barren place where no crops, and no power to remove hunger. There's shortages of food and always frosts and hail. And in other words, the four elements never behave properly. That's a common thing. I mean, look at, all the time we're having these environmental results of extreme rain, extreme fire. The crops don't grow properly. There's too much water, not enough water. Always the imbalance. The environment is the four elements. And when the four elements are out of balance, in this case, this is very much a part of it, Crops dry up or die young, or your business ventures always fail. No matter how hard you try, because of past stealing karma. It blocks you from receiving. So if you think of your life, there's nothing left over. There's the human body that you've got. Then there's the mind in that human body. Then there's the way you're seen and treated by sentient beings. And then there's the world you live in. There's nothing else. So if you're going to have these four ways of karma ripening and get it super clear in your mind, everything that happens every day, you can tick the box. So someone's mean to you. What's that? That's interesting. That's experience similar to the cause of lying. And then the environment harms you. The water's polluted you, or there's noise. That's environmental karma. That's interesting. So there's either environmental karma, experience similar to the cause, intention similar to the cause, or the fully ripened result. Your entire life is included in that. So instead of just going, oh, it's karma, be more precise, please. Go to this next level of clarity. It really helps you interpret everything in your life, and then you know why it happened, and then you can purify it instead of just being it's not fair, poor me, which is how we think. So the first one is killing, the second is stealing, the third is called sexual misconduct, which we know is driven. So stealing is usually driven by a miserly mind, a greedy mind. Killing is usually driven by anger or attachment if you're a fisherman. But then, a sexual misconduct is really obvious. It's driven by just cravings, intense attachment, isn't it? Which causes, so fully ripened result, of course, same every time, a lower realm rebirth. Experience similar to the cause of cheating. Mainly the one of sexual misconduct's got two types of results. It's very interesting. The experience similar to the cause of cheating on people, going behind backs, cheating in your relationship or cheating on someone else, is that whoever you work, the people you work around you are always unreliable. You can't trust people. You find yourself always having a lot of competition for your partner. Your relationships don't last. Some people spend their lives with their relationships like this. This is from cheating on sexual misconduct. So it's very much an experiential result. What's interesting, the environmental result is, I think, very much related to the energy of attachment, the greed, the craving mind, because that's it. You always live in a place where there's stinky and smelly and shit and piss everywhere and dirty and ugly and everything stinks and everything is very unpleasant and distasteful. That's to do with this grosser energy, the grosser level of the energy of attachment, sexual attachment, when it's really out of control. It's like an animal, basically, with all respect to us. So everything's stinky and smelly. Look at the world. Entire places are like that. That's the collective karma of those people of a sexual misconduct environmental result. It's interesting, isn't it? And of course, the action similar to the cause is you have a tendency to cheat, not so much to have sex. That's not the question. It's not a question of that. That's just attachment. This is to cheat, to go behind backs and have many relationships. I mean, you hear so many stories. I mean, a person I know you know, she was in a relationship with somebody, and then she's totally in love with him, and then he went and killed himself, and at the funeral, she thought it was her husband. At the funeral, another family entirely turned up from Singapore or somewhere. She didn't know. Some people have many lives like this. It's automatic instinct to hide and to cheat, you know, in relationships. It's not an uncommon thing. I was quite shocked when this other wife and other children turned up at her husband's funeral. My God. So lying. Each case, the fully ripened results are the same, negative, you know, suffering, rebirth. The experience of the cause is obvious. No one believes you. There's nothing more painful, is there, when you know you're speaking the truth and people just don't believe your words. It's so depressing. It's because of past lying. Or they're always deceiving you. People are always deceiving you. The environmental result, your work in cooperation with others fails to prosper, and people don't work well together, and everybody generally is cheating one another, and there's fear and many things to be afraid of. You recognize that? That's from lying. Environmental result. So in other words, environment includes other humans, but it's a particular way. It's just kind of a general environment. It's not directly to you necessarily, you know. Like this noise for Miriam is not a person abusing Miriam personally. It's not if somebody's outside Miriam's door banging things and shouting Miriam's a creep. You know, it's just generalized, isn't it? She shares it with a bunch of people in Zurich. So then the next one is divisive speech, which is kind of bad mouthing behind backs, basically, in creating disharmony. So the experience of the cause is you'll always be lonely. You're always creating division between people. You will easily lose friends. People around you are always fighting one another. People around you have an undesirable character. Isn't that interesting? From bad mouthing behind backs. And that's what we do, our favorite action. So look at the suffering we cause ourselves, each life worse than the next, you know. So clear. And the environmental result, so that of divisive, the environmental result, everything sort of, the ground is kind of with broken things and ugly and broken and thorns and sharp broken glass, and it's rough and dreary, no streams or lakes or water springs, and the earth is parched and poisoned and burning and hot and useless, and many things to fear. So much fear comes from speech, negative speech. You know, it's very fascinating, isn't it? And then abusive speech, abusing people. The experience similar to the cause here, this is you'll always be hearing distressing words, it says. But my feeling, I mean, maybe it's pretty personal abusive speech. Maybe it's not the sound that Miriam's got. But that comes under any one of the other ones of speech as harsh environment, you know, environmental karma of, say, lying. That's not that one so much. Ugly, and I mean, that could be that one. Divisive speech, Miriam. Environmental result, ugly and broken and noisy and ugly and unpleasing, you know, do you understand? Abusive speech, the environmental result, you'll live in a place, again, it's the same thing, environmental result of abusive speech. Lama Zopa says very simply, the environmental result of abusive speech is you're born in a desert. Nothing can grow. You see, everything is a fruit of karma. So if you look at the good side of a human birth, the best results in a human birth would be, you know, like you'd live in Zurich, nice and clean, except next door where Miriam lives. It'd be clean and not smelly. One Tibetan Lama was asked what he thought about the West. I bet he was talking about Zurich. And he said, it's so clean and you keep on cleaning it. So here, environmental result. Lama Zopa says, if it's abusive speech, it's like literally there's nothing can grow, nothing can grow, nothing can grow. Or also another interpretation, you live where there are, again, broken, ugly, broken things, sharp things, thorns, jagged things, difficult environment, sharp and hurtful, you know. So if you live in an environment, if you've got a human body, that's the fruit of non-killing. If you have the intentions not to kill, you'll wake up in this life with no thought to kill. If you have an experience as a result of that, you won't get harmed, you won't get killed, things will work beautifully, you live a long life. And environmentally, whatever you eat will nourish you, the water's tasty, the environment's very sweet, the food is delicious. That's just from non-killing. From non-lying, from non-stealing, let's say the next one, we'll go to each one for the positive side. For always not stealing, from merely refraining from not stealing, not to mention being generous. You'll always have resources and possessions. You'll always be able to make ends meet. You won't get stolen from. Sexual misconduct, environmental experience similar to the cause. You'll always have reliable relationships. People won't cheat on you. You'll trust people. It'll be very easy to work with people. There will be no competition. There won't be any jealousy. All your relationships are lasting and stable. Environmental result, it'll be clean and smelling sweet, and things are clean and beautiful, lovely things growing. You'll get whatever you need. It'll smell nice. It'll look nice. It'll taste nice. Lying, telling the truth, your work will always prosper. You'll work well together with people. People will never cheat you. Experiencing one of the cause, people will always believe you. I mean, do we not want at least this? Forget about nirvana. Forget about Buddhahood. Keep simple, please. Be a nice person, and this is the result you'll get. It's so uncomplicated, the advice, but we can't hear it. Yeah, that sounds all right. Blah, 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 We've got to create our own happiness. So don't steal, don't kill, don't lie, don't badmouth, shut your mouth, don't abuse, don't rabbit on about nothing. This is next one. Wait for this one. Idle gossip, blah, 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 vomit, vomit, vomit about any old rubbish. No one will ever take you seriously. This is the karma of being female. The world is changing now, but think about it. Especially in India or in those countries where you've got to cover your face, isn't it? Think about that one. That's classic, the classic karmic result, one of the karmic results of being born in a place where you have to cover your face and you open your mouth. I mean, who will listen to you? It's just about this kind of, it'll be like the sound of a bird. No one pays the slightest attention. Of course, it doesn't have to just be female, but I'm saying, you understand, where your words are not taken seriously. The classic one of the female, if you're in a group of people, is a typical one, you say words and no, you're not serious. Your voice is not serious. Even our voices aren't serious. When we get old, they get deeper. Listen to me, I'm like a bass baritone now. When my little girl got a little high voice, now who's going to pay a little attention to a little high voice like that? Who's that little squeaky person talking? Get my point. It's not saying female being bad to be female. Nothing wrong. Not taken seriously. No one listens to you. Idle gossip, because your words are just useless. Blah. Karmic result. No one pays any attention to what you have to say. Your words have no value. Environmental results, again, it's the same. Fruits don't grow or grow at the wrong times, or they seem ripe when they're not, or they have frail roots, and there's no leisure places, no water, all the speech ones bring different kinds of environmental results. It's very fascinating. It's very fascinating. Are we communicating, people? So there are 4 ways that a karma ripens. We know we've got a human birth because of non-killing. That's out of the way. If you've got a tendency to not kill, keep going. The other 2 are how you're treated and seen, and the environmental. And once you get it clear about these, then you can explain your life to yourself, instead of moaning and being a victim and it's not fair and poor me and why does that happen? And why does my husband not love me, You understand, people? It's very simple, very kind of simple, not complicated. Of course, it's a massive leap for us because who has the view of reincarnation? We do not, and we think we're so convinced there's a creator up there running the show. We're so convinced as a conspiracy theory. Someone's always behind everything. It's very hard to get the view of karma, which is dependent arising, which is emptiness. It's a natural law, It's very fascinating. Any questions? It's time to go home soon, 10 minutes. Yes. Who is that? Who wants to talk to me? Yes, sweetheart, talk to me. Yes, Ariana.
Good evening, Venerable. Thank you. It's always good to see you.
Well done.
How should I ask my question further to what you were saying, causes of karma? What kind of karma, how can we explain when your family rejects you?
Well, work it out. Work it out. Think of if that's an action similar to the cause. You mean someone gives you up? Someone gives you up in a relationship, yeah? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, family-wise, not relationship.
It doesn't matter. It's a relationship. It doesn't matter whether it's sexual or not. It's not relevant. If people reject you, give you up, that's due to sexual misconduct, cheating on people, quitting. In other words, cheating on a person, it's the action of going behind a back and cheating on a relationship, cutting a relationship short and cheating on it. So of course that kind of result will come. People's relationships, always people give them up, people reject you. It doesn't have to be sexual. That would be a typical. I mean, the idea is if you get a feeling of the experience, you can think of an action similar to that. It's sort of not too rocket science if you think about it. Do you understand, sweetheart? Does it make sense? That's what I'm saying, darling. Oriella.
So basically we can purify it, or
That's the point, surely. That's the whole point, darling. That's why practicing every day, vowing not to do these actions. Don't wait for the bad thing to happen. Just vow not to do them, purify them, live in vows. All of this is the perfect techniques for purifying these, and even it can help to change things now. Do you understand, darling? Wolfgang,
yes.
Dear Wolfgang, yes.
Hello, Venerable Robina.
Yes.
Do you know what is the link between the mental world and the material world? How
Good
does
question.
it work?
Yeah, I hear you. It's a very good question. So to do that, I've got to explain. I've done it briefly a few times, but I'll try and do it more deep. Now that you've asked the question, you'll hear it more clearly. I've got my window open. You can hear loud noises. Okay, it's a really good point, Wolfgang. Otherwise, it all sounds so abstract. In other words, how there can possibly be environmental karma. So it's like this, and it's explained most deeply, Wolfgang, in the Vajrayana system, which is the one that's coming from the Hindu system as well. I mean, all the business of yoga and all that explanation of the physical wind energies and all this, how they talk. So basically, the Vajrayana system says we've got gross consciousness, and we have gross body, which is this physical body, and they're inextricably linked, okay? The key thing in the Buddha, okay, no, I'll go back further. The Buddhist, this view would say that the universe consists of billions and billions of sentient beings, and they're made up of a mind, and then all of those minds, then the world is made of two things, minds and then matter. And matter is made of the four elements, earth, air, fire, water. I think we used to talk that a few hundred years ago in our culture, isn't it? Back in the old-fashioned days. But still, that's the Chinese system. That's absolutely the Tibetan medical system. That's the Vajrayana system. That's the Indian system. Still, they discuss it like that. This is fundamental, and all the explanations are based on this one. So then all minds, and this is the unique point, this is the point, are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements, okay? All minds are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. So so now that's the one point. Now, as you've probably heard this several times before, as they describe that we've got gross consciousness, which is your sensory consciousness, which obviously is not physical. It's part of your mind, your sensory, your capacity to see and hear and taste. That's not physical. That's your mind, but it's dependent upon the eyeball and the eardrum and the nerves. So the physical and mental, in that case, are inextricably linked. You've got your sensory consciousness, which is not physical, and then you have your physical organs, and they're inextricably linked, right? So that's your gross consciousness and your gross body. Now, then you've got subtle consciousness, and that's really referring to all your more subtle mental states, your states of your intelligence, your love, your compassion, your anger, your jealousy. They are necessarily more subtle, and there are very subtle levels of those mental states. And here you now have a subtle body. They refer to it as subtle body. And the way they describe it in the Vajrayana, you've got a subtle nervous system, 72,000 subtle channels going throughout the entirety of your body. And throughout all of those channels, all these different wind energies or prana, they talk about, and they're described. I mean, the Tibetan medical system is that's its expertise, all these different wind energies. So coursing through all these different channels in your body are these different wind energies. But the point is this: your mental states are inextricably linked to all of those different wind energies. Clearly, this is not neuroscience. It's a very different model. So then this is why you go to your Tibetan doctor, and she will feel your pulses, and she will feel very clearly and will be able to identify the particular wind energies that are out of balance. And she will know that those wind energies are connected to your attachment energy, which is why you're having panic attacks or anxiety. She'll feel the other winds that are connected to your anger. All of our different states of mind have their own wind energies, and they're inextricably linked. Can you hear this, the concept? Yeah. Now you've got very subtle consciousness, the subtlest level of your conscious being, and then the very subtle wind energy. So that's why in the death process, gradual deconstruction from the gross to the subtle to the very subtle. So all of these grosser manifestations go all the way to the 8th level of this death process, and you get to the very subtle consciousness, they call it. And then there's the very subtle wind energy that's the deconstructed grosser levels all the way down to the subtlest. And this is one entity, this very subtle, clear light mind of Wolfgang, inextricably linked to the subtle wind energy. And then that's the building blocks based on all the karma, the karmic imprints that are carried with that goes to the next life. And then depending on the karma that ripened, Wolfgang will be born in a lion mummy's womb. He'll run if he's got killing karma ripening, he'll run like a magnet. That mind will be programmed to run to a lion mother. And then your mind will, and all those karmic imprints in Wolfgang's mind will then manifest as a lion. You'll get a lion body because you go to a lion mother, and you'll have the tendencies of a lion and so on and so forth, in general from life to life. But also more precise than that, as Lama Zopa says, let's say your mind, let's say there's some anger in your mind, anybody, doesn't matter. There's a moment of anger. Every second of what our mind does creates karma, leaves an imprint in the mind, programs that mind. But at the same time, what that anger is doing is polluting the wind energy connected to the anger. And that in turn, gradually, that subtle wind gradually manifests at a grosser level as sickness in the gross body. Because the subtle and the gross are linked. That eventually manifests as a habit, and then you get sick. So sickness is the physical result of negative actions and negative karma. So a virtuous thought, or even saying a mantra, every time you say your mantras, which is this pure Sanskrit sound, that's purifying your mind on the one hand, but because your virtuous mind is connected to its own wind energies, that's also at the same time purifying your physical energy, which eventually manifests as good health. And then not only that, as Lama Zopa says, let's say the negative or positive, that wind energy in turn and the karma eventually impacts upon the external elements and creates the imbalance of the external elements, if it's, let's say, anger or killing. And then you'll be born in an environment where all the elements are out of balance, where there's suffering, where there's pollution, where there's harm. So the entire world is the karmic appearance of all the beings who experience it. Whether it's harmonious and beautiful, it's all starts with the mind. And the environmental karma especially, it works over eons of time. That's why we don't need a creator. This is a natural law. Because of the intimate relationship between the winds in the body, that it's the same wind energies as the physical world. The 4 elements are in the external, whether it's a fire, all elements have aspects of all 4 elements. So fire is predominantly fire, but it has the other elements there as well. They go into great detail about it. So everything is driven by the mind. Everything comes from the mind, impacts upon the personal elements, which in turn impacts upon the external elements, which in turn is what creates the environments we get born in. So we create the whole universe, basically. That's the rough answer. Is that helpful? Wolfgang? Okay, good. I mean, it's all described in the text in great detail. I'm just giving you a very simple example, but it's sort of as a model, it's quite sort of coherent. It's quite interesting. I find it quite fascinating, actually. But it's described in great detail, both when you in the teachings about karma and in the teachings, and especially the Vajrayana model, in the tantric teachings. So I think it's time to go home, people. Our hour and a half is gone like a dream. I turned up. I didn't forget you. I forgot the poor Sydney people. Last week I was sitting in Istanbul in an airport, and I forgot to tell them I would be there. No, sorry, it was 2 in the morning, and I forgot to cancel the teaching, and I forgot to get up. So the poor Sydney people all waiting for me. I'm very unreliable. I'm really sorry. I'll try and be more reliable. That's it, everybody. So we're not meeting again until when, Lars?
April 6th, about attachment and what we can possibly
Okay,
do.
let me just check. Wait, let me check the calendar. April 6th, right?
April 6th, and then also April 20.
April 6th. Yeah, I
Yes.
should be here. Yeah, I should be here. Unless I die, I'll turn up, I promise.
Thank
Okay.
you. We are much
Okay.
blessed, and thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Junction Central Rinpoche, Make Panam, Keguchi, Kepa Nyampa Mepa Young, Gong Ne Gondu Papa. So maybe develop wisdom and maybe develop compassion. Okay, everybody. And keep moving and never give up. Okay. Keep moving and never give up. Okay, sweethearts. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Doc.
Venerable.
Thank